ladies and gentlemen joining us today. Welcome to our session, Leaders in Communication. My name is Elif Çavuşlu, and I'm welcoming you on behalf of the Global Diplomacy Lab, the host of this session. The Global Diplomacy Lab, or as GDL in short we call it, is an initiative of the German Federal Foreign Office in cooperation with Bosch Stiftung, Stiftung Mercator, BMW Foundation, Global Leadership Academy, and German-American Fulbright Commission. GDL has been cooperating with the Bled Strategic Forum for the last 6 years now. This year's session will focus on a very timely topic, I would say, on how to communicate Europe better, how to engage the citizens in the European issues and the European democratic process, and how to make sure that the conference on the future of Europe is a success, reaching out to the widest audience possible. Why this topic is important? Why did we select this topic? Because the communication has always been a weak point for the EU. Since the early 1990s, we can say that there has been a consensus that the EU should come closer to the citizens and engage them more meaningfully. This is not only essential for a healthy democracy or the legitimization of the EU, but it's also very important for preventing and managing crises, such as the constitutional crisis in the early 2000s or the spike of disinformation and distrust during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, another important point that the consultations on the future of Europe show that there is a demand from the EU citizens that they want to hear from the Commission. They want it to be open, transparent, and communicate with them about its concrete actions, showing that the Commission, the EU institutions, and any EU actor has the best interest of the citizens. So today, together with you, our audience and our distinguished panelists, we will address the current challenges to communicating Europe. So which actors are responsible for promoting the achievements of the EU? Who is not doing a good job right now? Who needs to do better? How can we make sure that the conference on the future of Europe is not a missed opportunity, but it's a historical moment that changes how the EU communicates with its citizens and engage them in dialogue? So before we start, I would like to give information on the structure of the session that we are planning. In the first section, I will introduce our panelists, and I will kick off the discussion by posing them a few questions. Later, I will open the floor to questions, and we will receive your comments and feedback, and you can ask anything that you would like to learn to our panelists. We also have a live audience following us on YouTube. They can post their questions in the chat box. My colleague Victoria will pass them on to me. And finally, I would like to allocate the last half an hour to a group discussion among yourselves. This will allow you to have a more intimate, in-depth discussion with each of our panelists. Also with yourselves, you can discuss among yourselves the issues that you feel important and come up with recommendations based on your own experiences. And Ms. Director General will be joining us after the group debate, and she will be commenting about the outcome of this group discussion. So let me start with introducing our distinguished panelists. I will start with our virtual speakers, and I'm going with Professor Alexander Stubb. Professor Stubb, you are currently the director of the School of Transnational Governance in the European Institute, Florence. You have served as the Prime Minister of Finland, a member of the European Parliament, the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, and an advisor for the Romano Prodi's Commission. You are also one of the candidates to be European People's Party's Spitzenkandidat. We are delighted to have you here with us today. Our second virtual speaker who honors us with her presence is Pia Ahrenkilde Hansen. Ms. Hansen, you are the Director General of the DG Communication of the European Commission. You have been working with the Commission since 1995. you were the chief spokesperson from 2009 to 2014. You also served as the director for representations in member states in DG Communication and as the Deputy Secretary General of the Commission. It's a pleasure to have you here. And here in the room, we have three speakers with us. I will start with Matt. Matt Jacobs. You are the Chief Digital Policy Officer and Strategist for the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs at the US Department of State. You are an expert on digital strategic communication and digital diplomacy. You founded the European Digital Diplomacy Exchange that helps diplomats to navigate the digital information space, to counter disinformation, and to be better digital communicators. Thanks for joining us. Next is Sebastian Rodriguez, who is a political consultant and entrepreneur. Sebastian, you are an expert on campaigning. You run the European Campaign Playbook, which is a community of pro-European professionals with one mission: to write a playbook to communicate Europe better and create winning campaigns. So, you previously worked as a communication advisor for the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament as well. Thanks for joining us. It's really great to have you here. And last but not least, we have Réka Heszterényi. She is a youth worker and also a participant of the Young BSF program. Réka, you worked for the Foundation for Democratic Youth, which is a Budapest-based NGO, and you have background in civic and European education and youth engagement. Thanks for joining us. So, let's kick off the discussion. I will start my questions with virtual speakers, but I have a reminder for everyone. So I kindly request everyone to limit your responses to 3 to 4 minutes and be mindful about the time limit. So, Professor Stubb, I would like to go back to a couple of years ago and refer to your campaign. When you were running the campaign to be EPP's Spitzenkandidat, you have identified communication of the EU with its citizens as an area that needs to be improved by the new Commission President. I'm quoting, you have said, if there was an award for the worst communication strategy in the history of world politics, the European Union will be a serious contender. You firmly believe that the EU must get serious about communication. So, since you give lots of importance to this topic, I would like to ask you, what are the main challenges to communicating the European project? And what would be your recommendations for improving the EU communication?
Sure, thanks a lot. And before I answer, I guess I have to make two remarks. Number one is there's a clear difference between being a politician and an academic. As a politician, you basically have to give an answer which is black and white. It's usually yes and no, and it has to be an exciting quote, just like the one I had clearly given as a Spitzenkandidat. But as an academic, life is a hell of a lot easier because the answer to virtually everything that you deal with is, well, it depends. So now I'm more in the it depends mode. My second point is that having said that, I would actually argue that the current communication strategy of Ursula von der Leyen and her commission is bloody good. So clearly, I was worried for nothing. But on a more serious note, let me try to answer your question on how to communicate the European Union in two ways. First, how not to communicate, and second, how to communicate or what my advice would be. Now, I'm a born and bred EU nerd, so how not to communicate is something quite close to my heart when I've been following how we have developed our beloved union. Number one, please avoid using the term citizen. Citizen is a nice term, but it is actually quite derogatory because what you end up doing is basically speaking of yourself in a third person and saying to the effect that our citizens want. That's something that you hear very often in the European Parliament. And I'm not very sure that anyone in the European Parliament, in a national government, the Commission, or any institution for that matter, should or can say that they represent and know what every citizen wants. Secondly, do not do top-down communication. Yes, you can nudge the communication in one direction or another, but this sort of slightly old-fashioned European narrative of peace, prosperity, and security, and functionalism, and the rest of it, I don't think it flies anymore. Thirdly, please do not use EU language. You know, I love the directive on the odometer of 2 to 3-wheeled motor vehicles, but that is probably the type of language that you don't want to use when you are communicating about Europe. Fourthly, try to stay away from procedure. I'll be very frank with you. I love qualified majority voting. I really am interested in the power balance between the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council, but not everyone is. And we have to understand that procedural debates are not that exciting. And I say that as a veteran of the Amsterdam negotiations, Nice negotiations, and the Constitutional Convention. And number 5, do not talk about European institutions. It's not sexy, if you know what I mean. Okay, so those are the not things to do. Now, what to do on communication, and here's where I think the current Commission has gotten it right. Number 1, do events-based communication, and that basically means crisis communication. I actually think that the European Commission has done an excellent job, for instance, on COVID and its communication. I'll just give one current example. Yesterday, or was it the day before, the President of the European Commission comes out on a clear video and says 70% of the European population has a double vaccination. We have reached our target, but it's not good enough. We need to move forward. It's crisis communication. And I think they've done an excellent job on that, and they have taken the space on that. Second, have a vision. And I think that's what the Commission has done right again. If you look at the von der Leyen Commission and what they defined early on as their vision, if you will, it was number 1, the Green Deal and climate. Boom, Fit for 55, 13 legislative proposals, heavy-duty stuff, and it actually creates a debate for and against and somewhere in between. Number 2, digitalization, a little bit less tangible, difficult to deal with data or biotech, but with hindsight, we will all know that this is the field that the European Union needs to communicate. And then thirdly, this is a bit more complicated, but us nerds love it, a geopolitical commission. So, you know, they're doing, I think, a good job. Now, my third point is to say that the European Union needs to be engaged in its communication. And that's a little bit more difficult. It's easy to say, but more difficult to materialize. I think the Conference on the Future of Europe, which we will talk about, is a good start. How that will pan out, we really don't know at this stage. So be engaged. Number 4, try to have a dialogue, whatever that means. And then finally, and I'll finish here, number 5, use modern means of communication. No one is any more interested in long press releases, except some journalists, which is great. But that's why I think memes, tweets, Instagram posts, Facebook things, all of this stuff, the Commission has actually been doing extremely well in the past few years. So, as I said from before, this is not about black or white, yes or no. It's about it depends. And I actually think if there was a balance, the Commission is communicating Europe fairly well at the moment.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to hear that you are more or less satisfied with the Commission's current approach, and I'm sure Ms. Director General is also happy that you are appreciating her work. So I would like to ask you, Ms. Director General, your reactions on Professor Stubb's excellent comments.
Look, Thank you, and it's really an honor indeed to be with you all and to be alongside Professor Stubb. And yes, I listened very carefully to what he said, and I'm not sure I will be able to avoid the word citizen as we go forward. But I think he has framed it very well. While we of course can identify very easily challenges and things that we should improve in EU communication. I agree that we have come a very, very long way, and we've had some successes. It's true. You referred to it in your introduction when you set the scene, Elif, decades back. And when we consider the unprecedented pandemic, I think it's also true. And Professor Stubb kindly mentioned one of the videos that our president is so keen to do to communicate about the action that the EU is taking in the pandemic and where we need to go next. And indeed that there's so much more to do and that we're definitely not out of the woods. But when we look at the last year and a half, I think there's one message that really stands out, and it is that we are stronger together. And in the beginning, there was, understandably, in an unprecedented crisis, uncharted territory like this, there was a lot of tension in terms of countries first falling back on their national structures. I also think that one thing that is true is that communication can never be better than the politics, and the policies underpinning it. And the politics and the policies needed time to get into gear to this, to respond to this crisis. But then, when that was sorted out, and I am proud to underline that our president had no small part in it, because I think it is true. Then we started to get the policy response and the EU response going. And if there was a shortcoming, it was that that policy and communication at first perhaps didn't go entirely hand in hand always. And since they are two sides of the same coin, as I like to say, they must move forward together. But don't just take my word for it. Look at the evidence, because 1.5 years ago, we saw these questions about EU solidarity in the crisis response, and then we saw quickly the member states pulled together because they saw the common interest. We didn't have a vaccine, and now Professor Stubb just referred to it. We have overall 70% of Europeans double vaccinated, and of course it's not enough. It's certainly not enough globally, and we are moving on two strands, the EU response, the global response. Also there, it has to go together. And thirdly, 1.5 years ago, we didn't have a plan to deal with the economic and also social impact of the crisis, of the coronavirus. And now already we have the money flowing under the historical Next Generation EU recovery plan. And finally, and that's my last point, in the beginning of the crisis, understandably, people didn't perceive as clearly as they do now the EU response, and we saw trust in the EU fall significantly. But now we're back at a level, and again I say that without any complacency, but at the highest level in the last 10 years. It was not a foregone conclusion. It was earned by all the action and all the actors in the EU. And of course, we will need to continue to be on our toes, because we're not out of the crisis, and there's more to do, as our president stressed in her video 2 days ago.
Thank you very much. I would like to slowly move into our topic on the communication of the conference on the future of Europe. But before I do that, I would like to ask our other panelists if they would like to respond to the comments that they have heard so far. You would like to add something? Sure,
if I may. Hello, everyone. Professor Stubb, and maybe to also help Mrs. Director General, if we cannot use the word citizen, then which word should we be using? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer to that. I mean, Europeans could be one, but I get allergic, you know, with the term citizen. There's something rather antiquated about it, and my allergy probably comes from the narrative that the Commission used in the turn of the century or turn of the millennia, which was, let's bring the European Union closer to its citizens. And I'm an EU nerd. I don't mind being close to the European Union. But when I look, you know, at my fellow Europeans around our union, I'm not sure that's what they want. They want the European Union to do its business, to create the framework which generates economic growth and therefore finances and supports the welfare state. But, you know, if they were to be asked, do you want to be close to the European Union? The answer to that is no. And this whole notion of citizenship, it's something that has to be, you know, built over a long time. And it's this old debate about the demos and identity and feeling. You know, we're all great European citizens when we play the Ryder Cup in golf against the United States, or when we watch the Eurovision Song Contest, or when we watch the Champions League, or whatever it is. But the whole notion that you create the citizenship, a European citizenship, I think we have to be quite careful on that. That's all I'm trying to say. So Europeans is the best term I would use to replace it.
Thank you very much. If Ms. Director General, if you don't have any comments, I'm specifically asking you, both of you, about the conference on the future of Europe. So this conference can be a historical moment to change how the EU communicates and engage with the people. I'm not saying citizens this time. But its success highly depends on how it's communicated, how it's promoted. And we only have like 9 months left to do this. So I would like to ask you specifically, what needs to be done to make sure that the conference is a success? It's not only confined to the Brussels bubble, but it reaches out to the widest audience possible, leading to a greater debate. So let's start with the Director General.
Thank you very much, and thank you for shifting the focus, you know, and if I should just tie the knot in the last discussion we had, it would be indeed also supporting very much what Professor Stubb said, concretely showing the benefits of you know, what the European Union means, what it changes, what it improves, and not only doing, you know, the political action is important, but, you know, we also have to show it, we have to tell the story, but not in this top-down and sometimes antiquated way, as the professor pointed out, but also, and there we come to the conference, by engaging more in a conversation in a debate, and we're having one today, and I really welcome it. Because it's not about sitting in an ivory tower and dreaming up a top-down message for 450 million citizens. We need this two-way conversation. We've been working at it for some time, but now we're taking it to a new level with the conference on the future of Europe, where indeed we want to bring in the Europeans into the very actively into the conversation, even more than we've done in the past, because we've had citizens' dialogues in the past. We called them that at the time when they kicked off in 2013, and there have been hundreds of them. But the conference is more than those, and the conference is at a different scale, it's a different level. And now the challenge is not just to sit and discuss with each other, you know, in the usual circles that are converted to Europe, but it's really to engage much broader audiences, the critics, the people who support it, the people who support a different Europe, the people who support the one we have, the people who have a vision. And it's the real challenge. And therefore, we are really mobilizing on our side, because it's not just a responsibility for the European Commission, obviously, but we are mobilizing all the channels that we can mobilize, our representations on the ground, who promote and organize some of the events, also working closely with the European Parliament, and also our local networks such as the Europe Direct centers that we have. But we also really zoom in on key groups that are underrepresented to help guide our promotion, because, and I think we had our Vice President in the leaders panel yesterday, and she also stressed very much, Vice President Suica, who is in the lead in the Commission for this project and part of the executive board, that we really need to engage and get balance in terms of gender, in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of geography. And that's easier said than done, and therefore getting people on board, getting our Europeans interested is really a shared responsibility between the stakeholders, and there I think about institutions, but also regional, local authorities across the European Union. So having citizens weighing in on our EU policies, telling us more about their concerns and how they see challenges such as indeed getting to climate neutrality, for example, how they see our European democracy evolve. These are the kind of things that we can see they are very interested in discussing, because if you check out the situation on our digital platform, those are actually the top issues at the moment where people are debating and where they are fielding new ideas. And of course, we have people, we have citizens, we have the Europeans weighing in on EU policy in a number of ways already, both, of course, eminently when it comes to our European Parliament's representative democracy, and we have consultations, interest group representations, and mechanisms also like the European Citizens Initiatives. But as I was saying, the conference really takes the possibility of the European conversation and of engaging citizens on all the big challenges that Europe will be facing in the years ahead to a completely new level. We are trying to be innovative, and we are really looking at deliberations that have never been seen at this scale in the European Union before. And it is crucial that we do this, because as we see, for example, in the tracking that organizations like the Freedom House is doing and has been doing over the years, globally, democracy doesn't have an easy time and is actually under pressure. And therefore, democratic innovation is also absolutely decisive. And of course, the lethal pandemic that we have been through bears that out also very clearly, again, with personal freedoms having been under pressure. And we have the sad, tragic illustration in Afghanistan these days as another stark reminder of how challenged democracy can be. So the conference, as I was saying, introduces this new dimension to democracy. We have a massive bottom-up agenda setting exercise before us here. And we have it online, of course, on our platform. We have it through events. There are lots of people. I think it was around 90,000 people who have so far participated in events in the conference. We have millions of people actually interested, looking in through the window of the digital platform. Of course, much fewer still engaging directly, but still notably 25,000 or so people have actually actively registered, and several thousands of them have fielded concrete ideas. And it's getting traction, even if, as I was saying, it's a challenge to get beyond those who usually engage on European issues. But of course, we don't only have the platform, we don't only have the events, we also have citizens panels, panels that have been randomly selected so to ensure that people from all walks of life will debate Europe's challenges for the years ahead. They are kicking off here in September, very soon. And there will be 4 of them with 200 citizens in each of them discussing and deliberating, and then putting their recommendations to the Parliament plenary, the 3rd important leg of the conference, before the recommendations in the spring will be put to the joint presidency of the institutions. And then, of course, it's for each institution to take further the recommendations, and what citizens say, what the Europeans say, will determine the result. But could the result be that we will have a more permanent consultations of Europeans as an outcome? Too early to say, but it could be a possibility.
Yes.
So I'll stop there,
yes.
but a very exciting conversation ahead in the Conference on the Future of Europe. But of course, here, as in all European Union communication, shared responsibility is a condition for success, and a shared responsibility for engaging the Europeans about what they care about and their vision for the European Union's future.
Thank you, Ms. Director General. I think this shared responsibility issue is a topic that we need to discuss further. As you said, it's really important because EU communication is not something that can be dealt with by the EU institutions only. It's such a complex issue, and it has many actors that needs to be involved. But before we turn to Professor Stubb, I would like to make a little roll call here, not to name and shame anyone though, but just out of curiosity. Have you registered on the platform on the Future of Europe? Unfortunately, the answer is 0%, but I will include myself and Sebastian and Réka. We are on the platform.
It's not too late.
Yes,
you
please.
You can do it today.
After this panel, we welcome you to have a look, register, and vote for the ideas that are already there. So, Professor Stubb, I would like to hear from you with your politician hat and your academician hat. How can we make this conference successful, or how, if what happens, you will consider this conference successful? So I'm also curious about that too.
Sure. Let me try to be short so as to leave ample time for discussion and Q&A. 2 points. The first one, I want to once more come back to the notion of citizen versus European. And this is thinking out loud. I think we should start using the term Europeans rather than citizens. I mean, just think about it. Do you see in the United States Joe Biden calling people citizens? Quite rarely. He calls them Americans or American citizens. I mean, yeah, in Germany, you call them, Bürger, and, in France, citoyen, and so on and so forth. But there is this notion, if we want to, try to create the collective identity, because after all, this is not about ideology, it's about identity. The term European and Europe has a positive tone to it. It's not negative. Yeah, I mean, they're anti-Europeans. That's fine, but Europe is not exactly, a dustbin of history or anything like that. So let's try to use the term European. That would, I just come back to that and leave it at that. The second one is on the conference on the future of Europe, and you mentioned that there are 4 of these sort of main events, and actually one of them is here in Florence. The European University Institute is hosting it. I think it's the 10th to the 12th of December, and we're really excited about it, and we're really looking forward to it. Now, my 2 cents, again, having been involved in Nice, Amsterdam, and especially the Constitutional Convention, I think we should do exactly what the Constitutional Convention did not do. We should do exactly the opposite. the Constitutional Convention was very much about, you know, Giscard d'Estaing. It was about hyping up the discussion. It was about hyping up the result. It was about listening to Beethoven's Ode to Joy when the Constitution was finalized. And it was this sort of old school way of doing. So I will just give you telegraphically what I think we should do. First of all, please keep the expectations low. That's when the outcome can actually be high. Second, do what you're doing at the moment. Get Europeans involved through modern means of communication. Try to get it as broad as possible. And I'm seeing already this happening through various platforms and networks. And I kind of like what I'm seeing. Number three, focus again on the substance, on the mega trends, you know, on climate, on data, on digitalization, rather than tinkering with, should we do treaty change? Should we have more QMV in foreign policy? That's fun for us who deal with it, but it's not fun, you know, for Europeans as such. So my final point on this is, do not oversell the project. Do not create the illusions about what the final outcome can be. And that's why I'm not going to answer the question, what do I think a good final outcome could be? You know, the European Union, there is no finalité. It's not an end station. It's a process. And that's why we have been so successful at the end of the day. So finally, be realistic. And one of the things I say to all journalists in the Brussels bubble or anywhere else, please avoid cynicism. This is not a cynical endeavor. This is a genuine attempt to get Europeans involved in a broader European debate. And as such, I think it already has, therefore, innate value. So don't stamp it down, let it live.
Thank you very much. I would like to turn our physically present panelists here, because I'm thinking, Sebastian, probably you will have some points to add here. Sebastian is leading a volunteer initiative that aims to promote positive narratives, especially around the Conference on the Future of Europe and in general European project. So, and he is really keen on communicating with values and emotions, not only with facts. So I would like to ask you, tell us your opinion and your reaction.
Thank you, Elif. Well, I am a firm believer that we should be constantly campaigning for Europe, not because I come from that trade. It helps my industry, but I firmly believe that the fact that the European Union somehow is not on the ballot box doesn't mean that we are not, that it's not being constantly challenged. And actually, the moment when the European Union is at the ballot box, it's too late. Let me tell you my story very quickly. I used to live in London for 8 years. I had a normal life, you know, worked in the city, go back thinking about where to travel in the weekend, for the holidays, go back seeing my family back in Spain. Normal life. I wasn't particularly engaged in politics until the morning of the 24th June 2016. And then you wake up and then suddenly the country has decided to leave the European Union. And most importantly, it has decided to turn its back to the values behind the European Union. It's too late. And then you thought that this was not about you, and then finally it is affecting you on a very direct way. And so I, a few months later, I decided I quit my job, and then I started to work with pro-European organizations to improve how they communicate Europe, to build muscle in societies way before the European Union is actually on the ballot. Because when it does, I mean, there is nothing, we always say in campaigns that when you go to a campaign, or when the campaign starts, it's not the time to bring new ideas. The time to bring new ideas was before, in in a campaign, what you need to do is to repeat your message, and if you haven't planted the seeds of pro-Europeanism in the country, then trust me, the others, our adversaries, they are doing it on a daily basis, and this is why so I started to do that, and I was fortunate enough to work in many different places, including during the This Time I'm Voting campaign in the 2019 elections. And I think I agree with Professor Stubb, and also congratulate the work that the Commission, the Parliament have done, because I have seen it with my own eyes that there has been a massive shift in Brussels. And my takeaway, I am now running a few initiatives, but one of them is to get people especially from the European, from the EU bubble, to promote a positive narrative about the conference. And you may ask why. And I don't know how many of you, consider yourself or work in Brussels. I don't know if there are many. Okay, so this is interesting for you to know. So what I found when I arrived in Brussels in 2018.
Sorry, we have a big sound problem here.
Okay.
If the technicians could deal with it.
Sure, just a second. You continue, please.
No.
Yeah, no, nothing. Yeah.
Professor Stubb, do you hear us right now?
Better? No? Okay, I will
Maybe
continue.
you can
now.
write in the chat that you're working on it.
Nonetheless. So this is interesting, and I mean, I wish Mrs.
Yeah, it's much better now.
Director General
Right.
can hear. Okay, perfect. So, when I arrived in Brussels in 2018 from London, and they said we're gonna work in this campaign to increase voter turnout in the 2019 elections. You know that in every single European elections, the turnout was decreasing, and everyone was so negative. I mean, it was like. It was a self-defeatist attitude. Everyone said, we cannot do it, it's going to be a disaster. And then it turned out to be fine. It was fine. We even increased turnout for the first time in many decades. So that's what I'm trying to do with this group, to avoid having this self-defeating attitude that sometimes exists in the European bubble. And I will probably, if you ask me what we can do to do that and to promote the conference, and I don't want to repeat what Professor Stubb and Mrs. Director General have already said, but I would say go to the conference, register, and then immediately hit the street, because we are Indian, we are an elite. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being an elite. You all seem like good people, but there are responsible elites and self-serving elites. And I think we are fortunate enough to be here discussing all these things, but I think we need to spend equal time on the street, having real conversations with people. And you can do it. You can pick a topic that is close to your heart, and then take it to your own community. It can be the workplace, it can be the golf club for those golfers out there. It can be your gym, it can be anything. And use this conference to create a conversation about Europe. And most important, just listen to what people have to say, because you will understand how, like Professor Stubb have already said, that the conversation is completely different on the street when you talk about the European Union. And listen to them. I think the process is important. I think people want to be heard. I think we need to show empathy. No one wants to be in a political project where they are despised, where they feel excluded. So I think even if the outcome is not as great as we would like to be, the fact that there has been a process and that people have been heard, I think it can already be considered a success. And by the end of the chat, I don't want to extend myself. By the end of the session, I think we can work on what each one of you individually can do in the next months before the conference finishes, and hopefully we can come up with a few ideas, and we'll be happy to support you in the journey, and hopefully the rest of the speakers can also do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. I'm thinking, Réka, probably you have something to add here, because as Sebastian says, it's important to go on the street and reach out to the populations that are not online, basically, who are not there already following the EU topics. You are working with disinterested or sometimes Eurosceptic youth. So from your experience, also you are a young European yourself, please tell us, how can we engage these groups?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I completely agree with what Sebastian said, because what I feel that there's a really important peer-to-peer interaction. So my experience is that when I work with young people, so we use the same language, we are interested in the same issues, and they feel closer to me than sometimes to decision makers. And of course, because of age, but because of the language and the issues. And I do believe that us young people who are already interested and invested in the future of Europe and who have a good understanding of it, we have the responsibility to engage our communities and to have conversations with these people. And I recently had this experience that I was having a friendly conversation, and then I heard somewhere that the EU is about control. And my first instinct was to go there, have you heard about the ordinary legislative procedure? And of course, that's not what you do. That's what you shouldn't do. And instead I just asked, why do you feel this? Or like, in what issues are you feeling this? And instead of using exactly what we said not to do, like the EU jargon and stuff like that, we engaged in a conversation. And this is basically what we do throughout youth work as well. And I would like to mention the bottom-up approach is that we give the youth the opportunity to choose the issues they are interested in. So for example, when we work with high schoolers, we go there and we help them to articulate their needs, their ideas. So what it is in your local community that you are missing, or in your school, in your class. And it can be, for example, that we don't have a lunch break, but it's not long enough, or that we are missing a community space in the city. So that if you give the opportunity for students to choose the issue, then they will be more interested in the process, because it's their own idea, it's coming from them. And I think that this is where, and I love the word citizen, because I'm dealing with citizenship education, but we can call it civic education. This is the very basis of citizenship civic education, is that you need the knowledge to be an active citizen, so to understand how the system works, but you also need the skills and the attitudes, and you cannot learn that from books. And exactly projects like the NGO I used to work at works on, when you give the youth the opportunity to explore the local problems, and you give them mentoring, and then you connect them with decision makers. I think this is where it starts. This is where active citizenship starts, and it starts locally. So it starts in the classroom, it starts in your city. And once you have this attitude change, this feeling that you can have an impact in your community, then we can like increase the level, go regional, European. So this is one of the points I would like to make, that this is about engagement and attitudes change. And I think this peer-to-peer element is really important in it.
Yeah, I think you're so right. They are great points. Thank you very much. I haven't given the word to Matt yet. So Matt, I'll give you like a blank check. You speak 6 minutes. No, I will ask you, because Matt is an expert about changing the mindset, the traditional communication mindset of the governments, and shifting their engagement into more like a conversational style. That's how he's providing training to several European government workers. So connecting you to what you have heard so far, especially I'm really interested in that bringing the local levels opinion to the upper levels. What would you recommend within this context on the Conference of Europe?
Sure. So just to quickly say, I want to thank you guys at the Global Diplomacy Lab, as well as the Slovenian MFA, for inviting me to participate on this panel. I know it's kind of awkward being the American on the panel. We all know Americans always have opinions, but it's really nice to be invited to share them. So Because if you don't invite us, we're just going to get up there and tell you anyway. But it feels good to do it with a proper microphone. So I've held, most of my work has been in institutions, and I've worked all across the public affairs field, whether it's being a press officer, a public diplomacy officer, or in my current position as the digital coordinator for the Bureau. And the one thing that has always kind of struck me is that, at least in institutions, a lot of the work that would be required to make these relationships and to open up dialogue with people through digital communication channels or more modern communication platforms is really just a translation of previous work, previous capacities that most of us already have developed and fostered over time, but it requires a kind of rethinking of institutional practices and challenging assumptions, and doing so with a kind of a brave face and saying, hey, we're in an entirely new kind of paradigm. How do we take what we have, what works, and what we're good at, and kind of translate that? And if you do that properly, you're going to actually end up precipitating the result that those networks or those platforms are seeking to develop in the first place. Because if you aren't operating in a manner consistent with those platforms, what you're going to do is look out of place. It's not going to resonate. It's not going to work. So regardless of whether the audience is receptive of it, if you're not moving towards the mechanisms of that platform, the impact of your press or your outreach is going to be a bit null. And so that, if we assume that social networks, if we assume that digital communication channels are, in fact, ways of fostering community, of ways of fostering communication, which again is a big assumption that I'm going to try and do, then it necessitates community, and it necessitates a community-first approach. But in terms of the kind of general, broader institutional assumptions and institutional processes that I think that not just governments, but also kind of larger organizations, NGOs, CSOs have to kind of look at when they address digital communication. There's a few things that we can take action on that'll move us a little bit closer to that. And the first one is, I think, something that's probably not a problem for anyone in this room, but it's the idea that digital communication channel users are somehow lesser than those who more often pay attention to print or television or radio. So as Professor Stubb, so sorry, I'm not used to having to be so quiet for so long that now I don't shut up for more than like 5 minutes at a time.
But you have only 1 minute.
So, okay, good luck with that one. But Professor Stubb mentioned this, is that there's this idea that if these newer channels.
Just call me Alex, please. Okay. This is just Finns don't do titles.
Oh, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. So as Alex mentioned, there's a need to kind of pivot towards more modern communication channels. However, within institutions where we have leadership who are more, I'd say, familiar with established mechanisms, they tend to look at digital communication channels or other modern communication channels as a means of connecting.
Danes don't do titles either, by the way, so you can call me Pia right away.
I actually wrote down Pia and Alex, so I think I was ahead of you guys on this one. But it's hard to get them to recognize the value of that, and they seem to inherently place value in the methodologies that they're most familiar with, and the idea that the intellectual elite, those who have any sort of kind of greater efficacious power within a certain society, tend to be more attracted to these kind of established markets. And then the digital communication side gets this, it's a little less serious. The people who engage on there are not going to be able to implement anything. Therefore, what we communicate with them is a little less valuable and requires a little less attention, which if I was going to put on my revolutionary hat, I think is just careening towards intellectual elitism and a good way of making sure that younger people feel disconnected from the institutions and really minimizing the relationships that are necessary to keep faith in institutions and keep people involved in the idea of an institution's purpose. So if you want the younger generations or people who maybe weren't traditionally involved in these conferences or in the elite circles, as you mentioned, to feel an affinity for this project, for the development of this project, you have to keep that relationship going. The second is that when you're messaging on digital communications in the same vein, many people operate with the idea that it needs to be this flashy, super compelling structure, that those who are online are not going to be attracted to policy statements or to hardcore news or anything. I agree with Alex that you definitely don't want to put a press release up there. I think I introduced that best practice to the world like 8 years ago, and I wish I could take it back. But the idea that, you know, if you're going to put a policy statement on social media and then you need a GIF or you need this to make it attractive, is really selling the platform short. Because if you look at these, they might be social networking sites, they might be ways of connecting people, but really they're just giant marketing platforms, right? And so people, when they're on a marketing platform, are going to be subjected to messages and tendencies that guide that platform that are rooted in marketing, that are rooted in lifestyle projection. So when we talk about policies, it should be really easy for us to lean into that and to say the result of policy X, Y, Z is going to be lifestyle that reflects A, B, C. And really trying to make the connection between not necessarily the end result of a policy, because policy is always changing, but a tangible step forward. And marketing that to a lifestyle, to a desirable outcome, to a certain segment. And rely on that kind of imagery, that kind of connection, where that is done through, you know, standard press, or if that's done through, as Alex said, memes or other kind of digital components. That's for the best. And the last one,
last point.
Last one, is that we have to invest discipline in this. Oftentimes, digital communications is seen as this kind of secondary result of other actions that have already been planned. We can plan for weeks on what the entrance of a principal to a conference is, but we don't give any investment into how we'd want to show that to the people in terms of what it represents. And some random individual is thrown out with their phone to take a real quick boomerang and post it on Twitter within 5 minutes. We spend 4 days crafting remarks for a president or for a secretary, and we give 4 minutes to the tweets. And the issue is that the tweet or the Facebook post or whatever is going to be going out there is going to be seen by a larger group of people and is going to remain online while that speech kind of goes into the dustbin. And so the idea that we don't invest a certain amount of rigor or discipline into what is a very important emerging communications platform is something that keeps us separated and segregated from the individuals who rely on those platforms to get access to information from us, who rely on those platforms to develop a connection with us, and rely on those platforms to feel connected with policy, to feel involved in the policy, who want to be involved in the democratic process, but use that as the channel. So the more we can show that we value them by showing that we value our work, the better it'll be.
Thank you very much. Dear audience, this is like my bad time management, but I gave too much time to the speakers because I think you feel the same as me. It was a great pleasure to listen to them, but I would like to give you the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have any burning questions, please raise your hands, but I would like to remind you that you will get one-to-one discussion time with these 3 speakers sitting here. So I see a question there. Can we please give the microphone to this gentleman?
Yeah, my question is, how do the panelists evaluate the appearance of right-wing anti-Europe populists for communication? I assess this as very positive because this increases the opportunities of broadening the talk. And I'm not sure, but I think that even the increase in the participation to the European Parliament elections may have something to do with that, because it makes Europe more salient for people, either in the positive or the negative direction, but they see this as more important and they want to do something for it. So my question is my assessment right or wrong?
To whom do you direct your question?
To whomever wants to answer
Okay.
that.
Okay, who would like to react then?
I can go first very quickly. They are the best in the game, the far right, in doing exactly what I just explained, in connecting with, finding their voters, finding, understanding
I can react, but I think there's a digital delay here.
Yes, probably. We will get back to you like in 2 minutes. Sebastian is already started to talk, so we'll get back to you. Sebastian, could you please like quickly answer, because we don't have much time, so I suggest panelists to take 1 minute to respond to questions, if it's possible.
Okay, they are the best in the game, and we need to learn from what they do, but we have to do it with a more ethical mindset, I would say. But what they are doing is right. They understand voters' anxiety. They show them that they feel like them, that they think like them, and they are giving them, in my view, false solutions to their problems. But they are being very successful at doing it. So we need to step up our efforts.
Thank you, Sebastian. Professor Stubb, please, in 1 minute, your response. We have a delay. Maybe you can write in the chat to him. There is a delay.
Okay, there is a 30-second delay, so hope you can hear me. Pia can hear me, but you can't. So, number one, please do not separate. Please do not separate right-wing from left-wing populism. They go pretty much hand in hand. It's a way of communication. You said best in the business. I fully agree with you. Two additional points. Number one, interestingly enough, Brexit basically brought the notion of Europe much better and closer together. Number two, be aware of external disinformation coming from, for instance, Russia. Sorry, it's impossible to speak because I can hear everything with a delay. That's why Pia is shaking her head.
We are really sorry that this is happening, but I will turn to the technical staff and ask them to fix this problem if it's possible. We have another question, I think, here. Can we get the microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. Since the Professor Stubb mentioned the disinformation and the way of engaging and approaching citizens through the communication and digital domain, I would ask what would be the best solution or some of the recommendation how to approach those citizens that are targeted from the fake news, because those news that were fabricated, especially the false news and the disinformation, which are aired through the web portals and after that spread through Facebook groups, Facebook pages, and I don't know, TikTok, Instagram, etc. They have huge audience and they have their followers. But when we publish some analysis that is fact-checked or good analysis, we are not approaching the same audience. We are approaching our own audience. So the question is how to approach the appropriate audience, because it seems even the media literacy is not giving that satisfied result as it should be.
To whom do you address your question?
Especially to Jacobs, but the others
Okay,
that are
just
involved.
I would like to remind everyone that there is a special session on disinformation at 4 today. So Matt, please, like a very brief answer to this, and then you can discuss it more detail in the next session.
Yeah, we can talk later on this, but the whole idea is that everyone is a target to disinformation. The people who are being targeted by disinformation are disaffected citizens. They're looking at kind of exploiting existing cleavages in society and to exploit that. So if you're talking about specifically that source of disinformation, everyone's there. So how to prevent them from targeting that is to look at what actions you can take through communications and other engagements that would be done by your government to heal or kind of address those social fractures before someone can go out there and exploit them. That's my short answer.
Perfect. So I will take one last question, and then we will break into groups, and you can ask your questions specifically, one-to-one to the experts. So.
Thank you very much, and good morning. According to news reports, both in Axios in the US and Euractiv, this morning Facebook is testing to reduce the visibility of political content on their platform, starting Ireland, Spain, and Sweden, I believe. What's the take of the panelists on this? Is it a good or very bad news?
Who would respond to this question?
Everyone is free, but maybe the views of the Commission would be interesting.
Okay, perfect. Ms. Director General, if you hear us, the question was addressed to you. Is there a delay still? Technical stuff? Okay, I will ask the panelists in the room. No, wait.
Yes,
she heard
thank you very much for the question. We would of course need to look into what the exact implications are. Can you hear me, or is the delay still working against us?
We hear you. We hear you.
It'll take 30 seconds for her to hear. I just like watching Alex as he's reacting to this.
You have the best position to see them. Like, I have to see like this.
Very good. And it would have to be clear whether we are looking at action to balance political presences on these platforms, whether it's action against disinformation or anything else. But obviously, I mean, it's very difficult to operate with this delay. Yeah? I think you're not going to get any meaningful answer from me this way, I think. So maybe we try to deal with the technicalities and get the technique fixed, and then we can come back to the issue when you're in the breakout rooms.
Okay, okay. You can write in the chat that we understand and we agree with her. So they wanted me to ask if you are also watching the streaming on YouTube. If you do, please turn it off. Maybe this will help. You are muted, Pia. Well, anyway, do we have any other question? But as I said, we will have a breakout with these panelists, and the other panelists are having troubles. So I suggest if our virtual speakers can hear us, and if they don't hear themselves.
I'm muted. Can you hear me directly now?
Yes, we do. Is it better? No. Okay. I guess we have to end this here. And thank you. Sorry, I have to speak to the microphone apparently. Thank you very much to our virtual speakers. Actually, I wanted to get their last comments, but it seems like it's not going to be possible. So the idea is that you heard lots of inspiring ideas here. We have 3 experts in the room, and we will divide you into 3 groups to work on different aspects of EU communication. With Matt, you can discuss the messaging and the framing of the EU project and EU achievements. With Sebastian, you can think about the ways of engaging and promoting EU achievements and values as an individual, as a civil servant, diplomat. What can you do in your own initiative? And with with Réka, we can discuss who should be the audience of the EU communication. Do we need to reach out to the disinterested or the Eurosceptics, or should we focus our limited resources to keep the people who are already pro-EU? So I would like each expert to go to one corner. We will bring them the flip charts, and then please pick a topic, pick an expert, and we will come back in 15 minutes with your recommendations. Pia will be back with us, and she will listen